Hi, and welcome to the Impact Narrative.
No, the Christmas edition of the Impact Narrative.
Yes,
We're
the Impact Narrative.
gone festive.
The Impact Narrative. The last Impact Narrative of 2017.
Alas.
Alas indeed, Mark. Alas indeed. Alas also for this.
Display of festive, the table festooned with...
Indeed. Something that I had nothing to do with. I went out to make myself a brew, came back in and someone had vandalised my desk.
Well, that's obviously the kind of spirit that makes Christmas what it is. The curmudgeonly refusal to let your hair down.
My beard has been let down.
Right, okay.
Indeed.
Well, and obviously this has been grown in the hope of playing Santa at the departmental
Indeed.
panto.
And I didn't even get the gig.
Alas.
Despite the jingle bells on my boot and bar humbug is what I say.
Quite.
Bar humbug.
I think that explains the curmudgeonly attitude to Christmas. It's all gone sour.
Yeah.
The Santa gig going elsewhere.
Indeed. So Mark, this is the last Impact Narrative of the year.
It is.
So it's been quite a year politically, I think, hasn't it? I mean, there's been a lot happening.
It has. I mean, obviously the year has been dominated by the award of University of the Year to Lancaster.
I was going to do a drum roll, but I guess the news has been broken already.
Well, I think it has, but I think at the end of the year, as Christmas approaches, we should be celebrating.
We should indeed. So Mark, congratulations, University of the Year.
Thank you.
Feels very good.
It does, doesn't it? And it's all down to us.
Obviously.
And it's ridiculous to think it's a year and a half since the referendum, but the referendum, quite amazing that an event so long ago should be so dominant in the headlines, so that our favourite radio programme this morning has been starting to apologise a bit for going on about Brexit so much, because there's a Brexit fatigue in the audience, but apparently people can't get enough of it still.
When do you think that Brexit fatigue kicked in?
Well, June 2016 in my case, but I think the thing probably it was kicking in a bit, and then the new developments, which we can talk about, have kind of rekindled it a little bit. But it's very, very interesting. We've not really talked very much about the British press. But last week, as the bad news kept rolling in from Brussels, it was very interesting to watch. Certain tabloid newspapers became really interested in the weather. And the front pages of the newspapers were dominated by Arctic blasts to kill millions or whatever.
Oh, very good. Certain newspapers have a particular predilection. They have a concern with this type of issue.
Well, they do, but they have that concern strikes them when there's nothing good to report for their favourite political party.
It's very strange.
Very strange.
I do want to touch on some of the papers a bit later on. There was one paper in particular that that I had a bit of a run-in with last week, Mark, to be honest.
Please
but,
reveal all.
Well, I will do in due course. In due course.
There's a Santa outfit under there, is there?
There certainly is not. Oh no.
Well,
maybe next year.
I hear the sound of many YouTubers tuning out at the disappointment of... Anyway,
yes. So, it's been a big week in Brexit. While some people are getting more and more fatigued.
Some are, but there's a bit more vim put into the argument.
Do you think so? You think that this latest...
and should we deal with that very quickly? Because, what's going on at the moment, because all this talk about backbench rebellions, I think you know more about that than I do.
I'm not entirely sure, but...
basically what happened last time the story so far...
Yes.
We should have some music in the background. The story when we left it was that the DUP had kind of vetoed what looked like a deal, and I think I possibly speculated that would be ironed out really by, in the end what's happened is a form of words has been discovered which satisfied the DUP and in particular Ireland, and it's a form of words which can mean different things to both sides, and it doesn't solve the problem at all.
So what you're saying is that it's been punted into the longer grass?
It has indeed, and this has been presented as some kind of triumph for Theresa May, and I mean I think it is in a sense a triumph, because she's been under such colossal strain, and she has come out the other side of this particular crisis and seems to have kept her her poise and whatever, and I think has strengthened her position within the domestic audience at any rate. But really, when you think of this as being presented as some sort of success, first of all, that was an echo of the old way in which EUs used to be reported, a victory for our side against theirs and all this kind of thing. Well, this was quite palpably a victory for, if we want to talk in these terms, a victory for their side, because in the end, all the agreements relating to the divorce bill and all that kind of thing, those are ones which the EU clearly is very happy with, and the border, they were very keen to get the border issue sorted. So what on earth has Britain gained out of it?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because a number of commentators were spinning this as a victory over the European leaders, over Jean-Claude Juncker and other prominent EU officials. And obviously individuals like Nigel Farage were saying that this is a real victory. But
but it wasn't. No. He was saying it was a surrender. And Nigel Lawson this morning has been saying exactly the same thing.
Well, others were spinning it as a victory over Europe.
Yeah, well, others will. But, I mean, this seems to me to be, I think that the presentation has reflected a great fear within the Conservative Party that Mrs May would have resigned if this deal hadn't held, and that there has just been a rallying around the flag. That's the only way to explain it. And it's very interesting. The Brexiteers used to be very, very good at spinning, and the media was in the palm of their hand. But they have been voices off stage saying, hang on a minute, this wasn't a victory at all. Certainly Nigel Lawson this morning was almost apoplectic, and I think he's written an article basically saying Britain is on its knees, or the government is on its knees. And I mean, that's way over the top, obviously. But the fact of the matter is the EU in this negotiation has got probably exactly what it wanted. And the main thing it wanted, of course, was to get this done before the trade deal was sorted, and that's where you could see the thing unravelling, because David Davis went on, I think, the Andrew Marr show or whatever, and said, if there isn't a trade deal, we're going to take our money back. And that, of course, is nonsense, because the money has been allocated in accordance with agreements. So if Britain was going to say, we haven't got a satisfactory trade deal, therefore we're not going to honour our agreements, then basically it shows that Britain is a state that doesn't honour its agreements. So that was a sign of complete and utter panic, and I think it also was a way of trying to say to the Brexiteers that we're still going to play hardball. Even though we've lost the game, we've still got a hard ball in our pocket, and we intend to use it. And of course, just ignore that stuff.
Well, I think that idea of a victory for Europe reflects what you were saying last week about the weakness of Theresa May and her cabinet, in the sense that if Europe obviously wants Mrs May to carry on as Prime Minister because they think that they can get a much better deal if she's in charge, rather than having the bombastic rhetoric of someone who is more of a tub-thumping.
That's the big fear. I think they could, because I have heard that they actually would quite like Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister. I can't understand that. I think that would show that they don't know very much about Mr Corbyn. And they seem to think that Labour is strongly committed to remaining within the single market. Well, I'm afraid if Labour got into our office, it would be going through exactly the same agonies as the Conservative Party. So in the end, that's the big fear. Exactly what you say, that they would end up with some posturing populist.
Yeah, exactly, and that's clearly not what they want. But we have this agreement. We have this so-called divorce bill. So what does that look like? What does that mean with regard to the broader Brexit process? So where does this leave us, having a deal or having a divorce bill? Yeah,
well, as I was saying, really it just means that Britain is agreeing. And what they've done is look at the list of financial commitments to which Britain had entered, and they've obviously looked at the ones which are ongoing and that Britain has kind of signed up to and can't get out of. So from the point of view, it's been presented almost as a kind of a payoff, but in fact all it is doing really is just saying these are ongoing projects and it would be ridiculous just to cancel them. But what it does, the overall effect is to promise or threaten to almost perpetually elongate the transition period, because this is still a period, if these projects are ongoing and the payments are going to be spread over many, many years, well, the implication there is there's still close cooperation going on between Britain and the EU over many, many years. And this is, of course, the big hope for the Remainers and those who are pragmatists on this, that there will be an indefinite transition period and people will just not notice that we never left the EU. I mean, that's obviously ridiculous, but that gradually the heat will go out of the issue, and and events will come along to resolve the problem one way or another.
So there's a good chance that what you're saying is that the UK will be stuck in this weird sort of zone of indistinction, to borrow a phrase from Mabon, where we are simultaneously in the European Union and also out of the European Union.
And a lot of the things, I mean, what happens to freedom of movement in this period? Well, and this is the other thing, we don't want to go on about this for too long because people have got Brexit fatigue, but the big news of the recent past, I think, has been that people, would-be migrants from the European Union, first of all, the EU's economic recovery means that it's less attractive to come to work in Britain, but secondly, just the vote itself has made people from Europe feel much less inclined to come and settle for any length of time in Britain. In other words, we've sent a message out to members of the EU, citizens of the EU, that they're not welcome. And so, although the net migration figures are still significant, there's been a massive drop in the number of people coming from the EU. And as I say, this is when we're saying about the effects of Brexit, the economic effects are still limited. Obviously, inflation, people don't realise that inflation is almost entirely the result of Brexit, because the reduction in the value of the pound. But that hasn't been a big reduction. Where we will find the pinch is the lack of recruits to vital sectors of the British economy. The health service, obviously, but lorry drivers, etc. The interesting thing, that lorry drivers' wages, even though there's a kind of a skill shortage with lorry drivers, their wages haven't risen, but that's generally, I think, something to do with austerity. But the fact of the matter is that without the EU migrants, we wouldn't be able to keep the country running. And when you get crises, I mean, at the moment we've got a crisis with the gas pipeline, for example, there's going to be a big hike in gas prices, that kind of thing. If you can see that the distribution sector grinds to a halt because there aren't enough people to drive then that's when people will think, well, hang on a minute, this hasn't really... people said, oh, we'll have a hard time in the wake of Brexit, but it'll be worth it because we'll be free at the end of it. But that's at the end of it. And there are lots of things people never calculated, which could well make people start to wonder whether, but interestingly, people in the EU will still feel that Britain isn't a nice place to come. And so the freedom of movement issue is actually almost, it hasn't resolved itself, but it has gone part way towards...
It certainly has.
Yeah. Anyway.
Even if there is that sense of it's not a very nice place to come and visit, there's also that added inflation, the austerity plus inflation, which will have an impact on people being able to come.
Well, absolutely. It's just people don't understand that inflation is edging up because of the... People don't understand the relationship between the drop in the value of the pound. When Harold Wilson in 1967, after devaluation, said the pound in your pocket is unaffected, a lot of people actually believed it. It was only the politicians who said, how dare you say that, because the pound is now worth less on the internet, but most people, he thought that was worth saying to reassure people, even though it was palpably nonsense. And it worked, because people don't understand these things, generally.
I mean, the other thing I think we should mention is we're obviously based in the university. We are...
I'm proud to be.
Proud to be the University of the Year.
Is it? Of course it is, yeah. It slipped my mind for a moment.
We should have put a banner up, Mark.
I think the university should do more to advertise this fact.
I think so, yeah.
I mean, I saw a square inch of the university earlier, which didn't have a thing about the Sunday Times and the Times making us University of the Year.
Reported this to someone?
I thought that it would cause too much consternation. That heads would roll.
Definitely.
Along the path which now every paving stone has the University of the Year.
Which is the rebuilding of the spine. to reflect University of the Year.
Yeah.
But my point is that there is obviously going to be an impact on students.
Well, go
in terms of
recruitment of students.
Recruitment of students, in the sense that there is this changing attitude, a change in perception about the nature of people studying in the UK, but also the cost of living, the inflation, and that will have a massive impact on a town such as Lancaster, which is a...
well, as University of the Year, we should be immune from the worst of these effects.
Probably will be.
But you can certainly see, I mean...
Top 10 in all National League tables.
Yeah.
But the impact that I was getting at, of course, so that we will be immune to, is that the towns that have a strong, large university, that are driven by the university, will be disproportionately affected because of the number of students that are able to come and visit, to study.
Yeah.
And that will be hugely affected. Lancaster's population of 50, 60,000 people, 15,000 of whom are involved in the university, a large number of whom are foreign students. And if that has an impact on the number of people coming to Lancaster, then that will have a massive impact on the local economy.
Well, it will, and obviously the one thing to bear in mind here is that people coming from a different country are the ones who are going to have to invest in a whole range of things when they get here, which they haven't been able to. So in other words, they have a disproportionate, it's not just, I mean, obviously EU students don't have additional fees to pay, but they do spend more. You would have just guessed as a, just a logical inference. And so, yeah, but... and interestingly, because home and EU students are lumped together in the figures that, as admissions tutor for our department for politics and international, I don't really notice it so much, but it wouldn't be at all surprising if there's been already a sharp effect on students.
Well, perhaps that's something to discuss in the coming months in the impact narrative for 2018.
Yes, which I hope is going to be very... we haven't said anything too uncheery, so I'll put this on there. And in sporting news, because this is the cheery bit, you're going to say something depressing later, so I'm going to wear this for the sporting news.
So sporting news, there was a battle, Mark.
Oh, there was
a battle in the tunnel.
Milkgate.
Milkgate, indeed, yeah. In sort of evoking memories of Pizzagate.
Yeah.
Many moons ago, when Arsenal and Manchester United players were involved in a tunnel bust-up, and Cesc Fabregas, long of Arsenal, and it's difficult to talk about.
A traitor, basically.
Some might say. Through a slice of pizza, that's Sir Alex Ferguson.
Are you sure it was him?
It's pretty much confirmed that it was him.
He's a brave man then, because Alex Ferguson allegedly would have, any boot lying around, he could have aimed a kick at it and it would have unerringly hit Cesc or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Just above the eye, which is very, very unpleasant. Allegedly. No, I think that's been fairly...
confirmed, right? Okay.
I'll take this off now, actually. I think it served its purpose.
Okay.
So that's Milkgate.
So that was
if it took place in a garden, it could have been Garden Gate. I've always hoped that there would be Garden Gate. But...
or if it took place at a particular station, say in Westfield...
Westfield Gate.
Wakefield.
Oh, right.
Wakefield Westgate.
Right, Westgate Gate.
Westgate Gate, which is somewhat amusing, but yeah. So there was this incident.
How
in
the nation would have.
Indeed.
Yeah. Anyway,
guffaws.
Guffaws. That's a great word. I haven't used that for a long time.
Well, now you will. This week's lecture will be full of guffaws.
Right.
Either by you or by
some other person who,
indeed,
with a sense of humour. So
we need to talk about two things. There are two things that I want to bring up. Moving away from Milkgate. One is to talk about the my incident with the British press.
Oh God, yes.
And then the other one is the Jerusalem crisis. So Mark, which one do you think is...
Well, let's go for your one, because that's the breaking news.
Right, well last week I gave an interview to an Australian TV channel about the crisis in Yemen and what's happening and the continuation of the Yemeni crisis, which is now the world's worst humanitarian crisis. It's overtaken the Syrian crisis as the crisis, the conflict that is affecting the most people in terms of humanitarian impact, refugees, in terms of access to food, water, human rights, protection. And it escalated last week with the assassination of Ali Abdullah Saleh by his former partners, the Houthis. And so in the aftermath of that, I was asked to give an interview. And I talked about the complexity of it. I talked about the perception that it was a manifestation of the rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran, which is obviously something that I've written about quite extensively.
Yes, quite.
And
there's a book, I think.
There is somewhere, yeah.
Anyway.
Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Right.
Something about power.
Was it IB Taurus that
It was
published
indeed.
that? Right.
Power
I'm sure
and
it's
rivalry.
available.
Somewhere, probably on Amazon.
Right.
Or
Good bookshops everywhere.
Bookshops, indeed.
Like the one on our campus, University of the
They do indeed
campus.
have it.
Mm.
But I was talking about this and saying that it's not just about the Saudis and the Iranians, but it's actually about a real mess of competing agendas on the ground, tribal, religious, ethnic groups that are all intermixed. And I said that this conflict, because of the range of competing issues that are at play, risks drawing a range of actors in. So like the Saudis, like the Iranians, like the Emiratis. And I talked about this, and I talked about it in relatively restrained ways. And then I got an alert from the press office,
Right.
who are really good at this thing.
Well, they are, as befits
Indeed.
University of the Year.
Indeed, it's the University of the Year's press office.
Mm.
They are excellent.
Press office of the year, probably. Certainly for us, in terms of
definitely.
Lancaster's best press office by far,
No doubt.
without
But,
any competitors.
So what I noticed is that I had an email from them, which said that I'd been mentioned in a news story.
Right.
Should I mention the paper?
It depends. How bad is the incident?
It's relatively bad, but the
Well,
story
no, I
is
think it's
still
probably
out
on the
there.
record.
Well,
It's on the
it is.
record. People could Google
They could.
Simon Mabon in controversy or whatever.
Well, I was mentioned in a story by the Daily Express.
Well, that's an
Of
accolade
all
in itself.
papers.
Right.
So the Daily Express put a story up that talked about comments that I had made, accurate comments that I had made, that had been taken from the interview and then taken out of context,
Right.
framed as...
That's surprising.
It really is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Framed as that I was talking about the Yemeni conflict, which will bring about World War III.
Oh, right. Okay.
So the headline was World War III. Expert says that Yemeni crisis can bring about World War III.
I missed this.
It was...
When I was reading my Daily Express,
Wow.
because I suppose I was so shaken by the news that the cold snap was going to destroy all life forms in Britain.
That you
I
missed
missed
this
it.
section on
My
World
eyes
War
were
III.
frosted
Yeah.
over. Yeah.
So they had taken these comments that I'd made about Yemen and how it had brought in all
Yeah.
of these external actors, and they had framed it as if I was suggesting that this will lead to a third world war. Now, I should add that I am a director of a peace institute. The Richardson Institute is the oldest peace and conflict research centre in the UK,
And probably the best.
and probably the best, given where it's housed.
Mm.
And for the director of a peace institute to be arguing that events will lead to World War III seems a little counterintuitive.
Well, hardly, because in fact you could be saying it as a warning, because as somebody who directs a peace institute, the world should know. I've got to, the Daily Express, I must say some of my faith in the newspaper has been shaken by what you've told me, Simon.
Really? Okay.
But
Shaken to its core?
even so, I think that gives you authority to warn against the Third World War.
Probably.
You're not saying, bring it on, Third World War,
Well-
chance of it happening now with the Yemen, get in there, boys.
Well, I certainly wasn't saying that, but nor was I mentioning World War III anywhere in the interview.
Ah,
So
that's
I had this big headline,
problem.
then they had a photograph of me from the interview,
Right.
and then underneath that, with the beard,
Right,
with the beard because it was on my face last week and it remains on my face today,
Yeah,
And there was a
glued
caption.
on. Yeah, go on.
talking about World War III, and it was just very, very odd. So the press office got in touch and they pointed out that, well, I never said anything like this, and that to suggest that I was advocating for World War III or talking about World War III was wholly inaccurate. And fortunately, the good people at the Daily Express decided that they would change it. They would edit it slightly to
World
to
War
give
IV.
a bit more nuance. World
Right.
War 4 or 5, yeah. But what it turns out is that they have a whole section on World War 3,
Aha.
suggesting that they are quite preoccupied with this idea of World War III, that there is this whole framing of events within the context of things that will contribute to the Third World War,
Right.
which is slightly terrifying.
Well, it is, but we're talking about the Daily Express, and so we are entering the worlds of fiction.
Of course.
But it
Well,
could
that
well
certainly
be.
was a story of fiction.
What they will have, they've got a set. When you say a series, they've got a set of headline, audience-grabbing things. Cold spell will kill us all. House prices will kill us all. World War III might be a bit inconvenient. That's the kind
Exactly,
of
okay.
and that's kind of thing sells newspapers.
Well,
to jittery people.
indeed.
The readers of the Daily Express, I would say, it's the newspaper for the jittery.
For the jittery. Oh, that's a good word too.
I know.
Oh, good job.
I've been storing that one up.
One might guffaw at the use of jittery.
In fact, you could say with all these newspapers, the newspaper of the, like excellent. And I think Daily Express, the jittery. It's like, what's it? Maybe it's the Daily Mail, the newspaper, the aggrieved motorist. I don't know.
The aggrieved.
The aggrieved. You see, I like the word aggrieved as well.
And,
anyway,
and we'll
so
let you decide your own adjectives for Daily Mail is the newspaper of the. The Sun is the newspaper
we should
of
have
the.
We should have a competition.
Yeah.
No, a competition to suggest.
Actually, yeah. If you want to get in touch, write to us.
And in the interest of balance, we could think of something insulting about the Guardian. And I could think of quite a lot, really.
Me too.
In the interest of balance, but I'm not going to say them because
please do tweet us at Dr. Mabon, at Dr.Mark Garnett. Or get in
if you
touch
want
with
an
us.
instant response,
send us a postcard.
So you were at the eye of the storm, Simon. You were the man in the news.
Of World War
My God, this is impact.
It really is on the impact narrative.
That should be put. That when the university, when we make our pitch for having affected the outside world, you could say you nearly caused World War III. That's impact of a high calibre.
A negative impact, certainly.
But impact is impact. There's Oscar Wilde said when he worked as a lecturer, there is no such thing as bad impact.
Moving on, we have one story left to cover, and then I think we're very much out of time.
We've got the test match. We've got book of the week. This is mine. Let's do that, and then you can end with the. Oh, okay.
Let's do the dark news and the frustrating political news. Then we'll move on to a lighter note.
Okay, good.
So the Jerusalem crisis is escalating. The Jerusalem crisis, as we talked about last week, this movement of the US Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem has really dominated events in the Middle East. It's resulted in protests across the region, from North Africa into Istanbul, across the region. In the UK as well, there's the expressions of resistance and frustration at this decision, which has, for Trump, it's kick-started the peace process, but for everyone else, it's really put the final nail in the coffin of the peace process, particularly the current peace process, in the sense that the US played a prominent role in this dialogue and this effort to try and facilitate peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But if one side, if this US negotiator or if this US mediator appears to be taking a side, particularly over the case of Jerusalem, then it appears that you can't really move forward with any degree of trust. So that's the expression of frustration that many have said across the Arab world. And this morning, President Erdogan of Turkey, a good friend of yours, I believe.
Indeed, yes, a strong admirer. Few.
He has said that he will unite the Muslim world in fury against the...
He said that today, because he said that the other day as well.
Right,
he's repeating himself.
He is.
Right. He said this on Twitter, I hope, because then I'll believe it.
Well,
but,
quite possibly. But that he will unite the Muslim world in opposition to Trump's move. So
Right.
I think that's something to watch over the coming weeks. To what extent Erdogan will position himself as the leader of the Muslim world. In doing so, positioning himself against the Iranians, who have long laid claim to this position of leadership within the Muslim world, but also against Saudi Arabia, who have also, because of their guardianship, custodianship of the two holy places in Mecca and Medina, framed themselves as the leaders of the Muslim world. So there's escalating tensions within the protest against the move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So I think that's something that people really need to keep a close eye on in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, however, I think there was a big expectation of sadly, more bloodshed, more violence, so that in some respects you might say, although obviously there's been exchanges of fire and as usual the Israelis have been quick to retaliate. Personally, I would have expected it to have been more of an incendiary move than it proved to be. But obviously there is terrible unrest and we can't minimise that. But the other thing, the thing about maybe kick-starting the peace process, that this idea that almost that Mr. Trump is trying to get into the role of being apparently a trigger-happy madman or whatever, and that more sane influences, shall we say, in the White House will then follow in behind him and say things which are startlingly innovative or whatever. I mean, I'm thinking about the initiative about North Korea,
Sure.
where having exchanged all sorts of ridiculous insults with the regime, that now the administration is making quite dove-like noises, quite extraordinary noises about we'll meet you anywhere, we'll talk about anything.
I think the problem in the Palestinian case is that trust has been massively eroded, in that it appears to many, not just the Palestinians, but anyone with an interest in this case, that Trump and the US have come down firmly on the side of Israel. There was a long-standing belief that they were in that place.
Yeah.
But this move, this decision over the case of Jerusalem has made it more tangible, more visible.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I could see a dynamic in which, as I say, nothing really has changed, because everyone knows that America isn't an impartial mediator in all this, and that by, I suppose, breaking up the logjam and saying what America has really logically believed for a very long time, you've almost cleared the air and made it possible for somebody to. But I mean, obviously, these are people who don't have great experience in diplomacy, and it may be that it sounded like a very nice idea, which, of course, incidentally, would take attention away from problems of Mrs. Trump of various kinds, but would also please a certain constituency within the United States. So it looks like a win all-round situation for everyone, apart from the people on the ground who are being tear-gassed and whatever.
I mean, it's worth stating that this peace process, the peace process that was born out of the Oslo Accords, can be traced back to the early 90s, 25 years ago, Mark. There is a clear logjam. It has become sort of a de facto freezing of the peace process. So something had to give. Whether this is the thing that will free it up to actually move forward, I'm not convinced.
No.
But anyway, something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as we're rapidly running out of time in this special end-of-year...
What book would you like in your stocking, Simon?
So, Mark, I've been reading an interesting book
recently. I mean, you don't believe in stockings or Santa or anything. But
hashtag bar humbug.
If you did believe...
If I did, I would suggest this book by Peter L. Berger, The Sacred Canopy, which is a really interesting book about the role of religion within the creation of this thing called the nomos.
And all.
This metaphysical entity that talks about the role of religion within society. So it's a really fascinating read. And it's a
page turner, light,
it really is,
airy kind of
light,
prose.
Light, yeah, easily accessible. It's only
Does it pass Mark Commode's laughter test? Is something like 6 laughs or something in a film? Or I don't know. It doesn't.
No.
No.
It doesn't.
Whereas my book of the week is, apart from my reindeer thing, is I've talked about it, and here it finally is, and a former foreign secretary, to be really topical, and senior statesman who was about the same age as me, William Hague, his book on William Pitt the Younger, which is incredibly old, but not as old as the Berger book. It was in fact 2004, but still available in all good outlets, I should think, and it is absolutely brilliant. The best single volume book on Pitt ever written, and
Excellent.
That amazed me, because, you know, when I first heard about it, I was very sceptical that it would be, but it shows that he's got a tremendous gift for prose writing, but also a great ability to kind of synthesise. Obviously, it's based on other people's work a lot, but he's synthesised it really admirably. It's just a shame that we're going to knock it off its pedestal with my Dick Leonard and I's book on Pitt and Fox, which adds new dimensions and passes the laughter test.
And when should one expect this volume to be out?
I expect it before the end of... I think if we're sitting here at this time next year, and you're by this time bedecked in mistletoe or whatever, because you'll have been converted to the spirit of Christmas and goodwill to all people, I think it will be in most people's stockings. Most people's stockings.
Excellent.
Discerning people's stockings.
Excellent.
So we're going to make it stocking shaped.
As one should. Not enough books are stocking shaped.
No, and I think this is a way forward for books.
Excellent.
In this internet age.
Well, I think, Mark, on that note, we are very much out of time.
More than out of time, probably.
So
nobody will ever see this happening.
Thank you very much for watching and listening.
In the cricket, Alistair Cook will be out third ball with a nick to second slip for 2.
All you can do is subscribe to us in the usual way. Look beneath the video line. You can subscribe, follow us, You can keep up to speed with us on Twitter, on Facebook, on SoundCloud, on a range of different things, on Instagram even. So yeah, do that. Have a wonderful break, have a wonderful rest of 2017, and to those of you celebrating, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, one and all.